Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and you know what time of week it is. It's Friday. Gotta get down on Friday, and you know why that is? It's because it's time for my Wrestlers of the Week. And I think, honestly, this across the board, there's not been like a Match of the Year candidate or anything, but from start to finish in this top 10, it's been such a strong week in terms of excitement in various different promotions, interesting wrestling matches. I say interesting because there's been a few wacky stipulations out there, and just a broadness of strength, I think. It's been a very diverse week, and you just love to see it. All different types of wrestlers in this week's top 10. So without any further ado, let's crack on and take a look at my honourable mentions. Quite a lot of honourable mentions to get through because honestly, I mean, between, you know, WWE's various different brands, Extreme Rules as well, of course. We also had AEW, we had Slammiversary, we had an Impact show as well on the Tuesday night just to round things off. It's been pretty hectic, so let's dive into these honourable mentions. Sasha Banks and Asuka, their match at Extreme Rules up until that point of the night was the best thing on the show, and then the finish was just, oh, the finish. Over on NXT, Oni Lorcan and Timothy Thatcher had another good rematch between the pair of them. That was interesting to see. Eric Young over in Slammiversary making a big surprise return. Not that much of a surprise, but certainly a poignant return to what many consider to be his home promotion, although he did fail to win the Impact World Championship in that main event. Jordynne Grace lost her championship, the Knockouts Championship, but it was a very strong match as well, so she definitely deserves credit there. Kairi Sane with a very surprising victory on Monday Night Raw, beating Bayley, the SmackDown Women's Champion, clean. And yeah, I mean, especially with these reports that she's going to be leaving soon, that is very surprising. And one final honourable mention to all four men in that Falls Count Anywhere match on Dynamite. That's both Young Bucks, The Butcher and The Blade. A very hard-hitting match, one which has apparently resulted in quite a few bumps and bruises and a few injuries here and there, so hopefully all four guys are okay. But now on to the top 10, and we start with number 10 from NXT, making his debut, I think, on Wrestlers of the Week. It's Bronson Reed. Sometimes it's quite tricky to imagine how a wrestling promotion, or a brand in this case, and in the case of NXT, is going to push somebody to the next level, from relative obscurity to, you know, the mid-card, the upper mid-card, or wherever. Sometimes it's just as simple as NXT made it look this week. Because what they did with Bronson Reed was they just gave him a big win. And not only that, but it's going to lead to something else in the future. That's because William Regal announced at the top of the show that Keith Lee, don't you forget about Keith, will be vacating his North American Championship, and announced a series of triple threat matches to determine the competitors in a ladder match for that vacant title. And the first of those three-man qualifying matches took place on this week's NXT, and it was Bronson Reed who picked up the victory in my favourite match on the show, I think. There were some good impressive performances elsewhere from Thatcher and Lorcan, I mentioned just before in the honourable mentions, and also from Karrion Kross in the main event. But I think this triple threat match was my favourite. It was Bronson Reed, Johnny Gargano and Roderick Strong, a pretty good lineup there. And it was Bronson Reed who picked up the victory. Now, immediately, I don't think he's going to win that ladder match, because surely it'll be filled with competitors of a bigger name value than him, certainly in the context of the WWE universe, not us, not the WWE universe, but the world of WWE. Bronson Reed isn't really as acclaimed as he was on the indies. However, I think he could. I mean, if they had him win it, it could be a big surprise. It could be a nice big shock to see this relative newcomer to NXT just pick up the North American title straight off the bat. But you never know, and I do think still it's probably a bit of a long shot to expect Reed to win that North American Championship, but we don't know any of the other competitors in the ladder match. If I had to guess who was going to be in it, I don't know who's available to them at the moment. I think we could probably say that maybe Dijakovic will be in it, as the novelty of a huge guy in a ladder match. Maybe we'll see somebody like Isaiah Swerve Scott, for example. I don't know, but it's certainly going to be exciting when NXT TakeOver XXX 30 rolls around. So 1 point for Bronson Reed there. Moving on now to 2 points in number 9 position. It's the leader of the Wrestlers of the Week league table at this stage of the year, Cody Rhodes. Cody took part in the most exciting part of Dynamite for my money. Personally, I found it very exciting, that opening match of the show, but not because of Cody. Regardless of that, I still think he put in a really good performance and won one of my favourite matches of the week, so that's good for a couple of points, isn't it? One thing I really like about Cody's current storyline, this run with the TNT Championship, is the slow build, but at the same time, the slowness of the build often frustrates me because I'm just like, come on, let's get to his next big pay-per-view match. Because Cody so often steals the show in these big pay-per-view matches he has. He rarely goes on last, but often his is the match that people are most talking about once the show is said and done. Matches like the one against his brother at Double or Nothing, matches like the one against MJF, matches like the one against Jericho. They're often very, very good, but moreover, they're often very, very good stories. And whereas, you know, matches like this one on Dynamite told a bit of a story, the spotlight of the story was not on Cody Rhodes. And I understand that it can't be the Cody show all the time, 24/7, because that would become very tiresome very quickly if it was all focused on one guy. So I shouldn't have done that. Roman seems like a really cool dude. Why have I done that? But at the same time, I cannot wait to find out what Cody's next big feud is. I've got a feeling it'll be like him versus a mystery opponent. They're going to come out and it's going to be someone big and they're going to beat him, and then, you know, the story will progress from there and the lineage of the belt will progress from there. But I don't know. As for this week, a great performance by Cody in that opening match of Dynamite. 2 points for him. This week's number 8. Oh my god, if you've seen like quite a few of my videos this week, you'll know that I was a very excited boy when Slammiversary rolled around last weekend, because in the opening match, the Rascals put up an open challenge, and who should have answered it but the Motor City Machine Guns. I've mentioned this enough times already, but you know, the Motor City Machine Guns are one of my favorite tag teams of all time. I absolutely love their initial Impact run. I love the style that they have in the ring, the smoothness, the teamwork, and the speed. They're just so good. They're kind of like the next step in the evolution of like the Rock and Roll Express, the Hardy Boys. And then in the sort of the 2000s, the mid to late 2000s, we had the Motor City Machine Guns, and they seem to very much be the next big thing. And then the Young Bucks kind of stole their thunder. So if you've never watched a Young Bucks match, oh my god, check them out. So number 8 this week, I've waffled on enough already, but it's Alex Shelley, one half of the Motor City Machine Guns. I'm not going to dwell too much on either of them individually. I chose a very arbitrary thing to separate them, give one more point than the other, but honestly, it was a great performance by the pair of them and a great return, compounded by the fact that on Impact on Tuesday night, they then won the Impact Tag Team Championships from the North. So a huge week for the Motor City Machine Guns, 2 pretty good matches, but more important than the matches themselves, the story of them returning and then on Impact winning the tag belts. And I can't wait to see what happens from here. It means there's going to be more Motor City Machine Guns matches, and I'm so excited. That means, of course, that number 7 is Shelley's tag partner, Chris Sabin. Hail Sabin, as everybody says, because it sounds like Satan, you see. And he doesn't look like that anymore. He's got shorter hair now, but it's a cool picture. Anyway, that, by the way, that thing they do, I learned thanks very much to Austin, one of our moderators, who basically informed me that that's the state of Michigan. Motor City's Detroit, obviously in Michigan, and the state of Michigan looks like a hand, and if you point to where you live in the state of Michigan, like that's where Detroit is on the hand. So yeah, so that's cool. That's a cool little thing that I learned about the Motor City Machine Guns. I only learned about it in the past couple of years. Anyway, oh, what was I going to talk about now? Oh yeah, Chris Sabin and how well they did. The only reason that I've given Chris Sabin one more point is honestly because he got the sneaky roll-up pinfall, which won them the tag team titles. But in the case of the Machine Guns, it's hard to separate them in terms of who did better in a certain match, even more so than various other different tag teams out there, because they're both so cooperative. They work in synergy. There's a lot of double team moves, and they don't really overshadow the other. I guess you could maybe say that Sabin is the work rate guy and Shelley is the personality guy, but honestly, the difference is so like close, it doesn't really make too big a deal. So yeah, a bit of a strange couple of entries there, because I've just talked about the Motor City Machine Guns as a whole, and I've been rambling very excitedly since the start of Alex Shelley's entry. But number 7 is Chris Sabin, number 8 is Alex Shelley. I mean, the Motor City Machine Guns are back, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Number 6, the very cocky, but he backs it up, the very cocky new X Division champion, Chris Bay. Yeah, I think one of the more easily forgotten parts of Slammiversary, because it was such an impressive show, was Chris Bay's X Division title win. And he beat a very popular babyface champion in Willie Mack, but honestly, I couldn't argue with the decision because it was time for the reign to end. It's been a decent reign. Willie Mack's great. I still really enjoy his matches, but Chris Bay is something new and fresh and exciting. It was a good match. It wasn't like the wildest X Division match out there, but the two had a very good chemistry together, the bigger guy versus the smaller guy, and it worked really well. Even though he's a bigger guy, Willie Mack's still very nimble and agile, and Chris Bay is just a bit of a speed demon. So I was really enjoying that. And I was pretty pleased with the result as well. Honestly, I wouldn't have minded who'd won, but because Chris Bay won and he's the new champion, he gets on this list. I think the pair also had a rematch on Impact, which wasn't quite as good as the Slammiversary match, but it was still alright. And Chris Bay continues his reign. Now, Matthew pointed out something to me on the podcast, which goes out later today, which was that Chris Bay apparently uploaded a photo somewhere on social media of when he was a child and he'd been gifted a replica belt of the X Division Championship when he was a kid. So in a way, he's achieved his childhood dream of becoming X Division champion, which is really cool. I really like to see that. And yeah, absolutely delighted for him. So congratulations, Chris Bay. I wonder what comes next for him, because the Impact X Division at the moment, because of the lockdown and everything, isn't quite as diverse and exciting as it usually is. There's the same few names cropping up here and there, and then some of them have moved up to the main event scene, such as Ace Austin, for example. So I wonder who he's going to be facing to defend his title going forwards. It'll be interesting to see what Impact do. And yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Number 5, and still WWE champion, it's big Drew McIntyre. It was a very unique match for Drew at Extreme Rules, but also I think it was my favourite match of the night. Himself versus Dolph Ziggler, in the match where Ziggler was the only one allowed to use Extreme Rules, use the no DQ stipulation. And this led to some very unique moments that you wouldn't see in any other match, such as Drew going to put Dolph through a table and then realizing mid-suplex that he can't do that and twisting around so that he lands on the floor. Very good stuff. Drew is always a very smart wrestler, very good at building his matches, very good at the ebb and flow of matches. And yes, he wrestles in that WWE style, which can get a little bit boring sometimes when every match on the show is like it. But Drew's so good at those type of matches that I don't think it really matters. Also, because I did get a little bit worried actually that they were going to give the belt to Ziggler finally as like a thank you for all his years of service to WWE. But instead, Drew did retain, which was the right call 100%. Even though a strange anarchic part of my brain was like, wouldn't it be quite funny though if Drew lost? Wouldn't that be pretty interesting? But no, he picked up the win. Big Claymore Kickington, as Ross Tweddle would probably say. And it was just a delightful match in a card of ups and downs, shall we say. What's next for Drew? Well, it's another match against Dolphy Ziggs. But in this instance, it's Drew who's picking the stipulation. So it's either going to be a really quick squash because it's a stipulation that Drew really enjoys, or it's going to be something like a ladder match which favors Dolph more, but Drew's going to overcome. That's the way I see it going. And if you disagree, then you're wrong. Great stuff for Drew this week, but once again, I just really want this reign to carry on until fans are back in the arena. He deserves to have that moment with the WWE title in front of a packed out arena, or at a massive pay-per-view in a stadium, whichever comes first. He deserves that more than most. Number 4, let's talk about the Slammiversary main event, guys. So it was a fatal 4-way match, and one of the wrestlers was a mystery entrant. But that mystery entrant turned out to be Rich Swann. And everyone was like, oh, he's already on the roster. But then there was a 5th entrant announced at the very last minute, and that turned out to be Eric Young. And as I mentioned in the honourable mentions, he did not win the match. Instead, it was won by this week's dude, Eddie Edwards. It took me a little while to realise, but this is not Eddie Edwards' first reign with the Impact World Championship. It's his second reign because he won it back in Bobby Lashley's heyday before losing it shortly afterwards. Potentially back to Lashley, I can't quite remember. Or it may have been EC3 or Matt Hardy or maybe even Drew. I think I've got my timelines all mixed up. He lost it after a little while anyway, but this reign could last a while longer. Eddie Edwards was great in this match. While usually in big multi-man matches, I can't give too much credit for the whole, you know what I mean, like there's loads of people in one match, so you can't single out one guy too much for too much praise. However, in this case, because it was an elimination match, Eddie Edwards lasted from start to finish, and towards the end was very much the focal point of the bout. Very, very late on in the match, it became him versus Ace Austin, and it was Eddie Edwards who picked up the feel-good babyface victory. Then the heels beat him down, ruining his celebration, but then the club came out, or the Good Brothers, Gallows and Anderson, whatever you want to call them, they came out and pretty much saved the day. So I wonder going forwards if we're going to see a bit of an alliance between Eddie Edwards, who's kind of rough and ready at this stage in his career, wields that kendo stick, he looks all punk rock and stuff, whether we're going to see him align with the Good Brothers, who are quite rough and ready themselves, and they're quite cheeky boys, aren't they? And they're baby faces apparently, given that they attacked Fulton and Austin on the show, so maybe they're all going to form a little babyface trio. If not, that's cool as well. It was still a nice way to introduce Gallows and Anderson. But also, Eddie Edwards deserves it, man. He's been great for years and years and years. He was an excellent technical wrestler in Ring of Honor about a decade ago, feuding with Davey Richards, his longtime tag partner slash feud rival. Later on, they went to Impact together as a tag team. Eddie Edwards is still there and has now won his second Impact World Championship. Now moving on to number 3, a bit of a controversial choice, I think, for many people probably, but I honestly thought this guy was the standout performer at Extreme Rules. No, it's not Rey Mysterio, even though he did lose an eye. It's Dolph Ziggler. This may be Ziggler's first appearance on Wrestlers of the Week in its entirety, certainly at least in 2020, and he fully deserves it. When he was announced as Drew McIntyre's opponent, everyone went, oh, another title shot for Dolph Ziggler. But no, their match was awesome, partly because of the stipulation, but partly just because Dolph Ziggler reminded us all how talented he is. One of the best parts of the match for me, and maybe the spot of the night, alongside Kofi getting slammed through that table by Cesaro, was when Ziggler climbed up to the ring post and left off with an insane elbow drop to Drew, who was on a table outside of the ring below. And yes, somewhat predictably, Ziggler did not win the match, but again, as I mentioned earlier, I think that was probably the right call. But now all I can think is, can you imagine if Dolph Ziggler were to beat Drew McIntyre in the rematch? I don't think it'll happen, but if it did, oh my word, I can totally see it actually. I can totally see Ziggler winning and then Drew winning it back shortly afterwards before the fans all come back in. Oh, now that I've said it, oh, they might do that. No, I don't want that to happen, but at the same time, I do really appreciate Dolph Ziggler picking up 8 big points this week for his excellent performance at Extreme Rules. 3rd place for him on the league table. Now let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is Diona Perez, the new Impact Knockouts champion, waltzing into the company straight out of NXT, straight into Impact, challenging the champion, beating her, and becoming the new champion herself. Perez is great. She's the virtuoso, which means she's so technical. She knows what she's doing with submissions and stuff like that. But moreover, I've used the word moreover quite a lot in this video. Moreover, that's not what ergo means. Moreover, I think that Perez really showed her versatility in this match. She put on one of the best matches of the week. In a week packed with big matches, it was Jordynne Grace and Diona Perez who kind of threatened to steal the show. It's a very disappointing result, however, for Jordynne Grace, which is why she doesn't make the top 10, because even though the match was good, I feel like her reign had a little bit further to go, and it was just a case of bad timing. Here comes Perez, we're putting the belt straight on her. Sorry, Jordynne Grace, your reign's done. And I feel like Grace's reign didn't really have that signature moment that it needed. She had a few big victories over like Taya Valkyrie and stuff like that, but she didn't have that big match to really solidify her as a great champion. Now that Perez has got the belt though, there's every chance that Grace will come back for revenge. But of course this entry is all about Diona, who put in a fantastic performance, won the title as well, and I'm excited to see what happens next. You might not think this if you only caught Impact for the first time in years at Slammiversary last week, but the Knockouts division is actually very good. The only thing is that the other women's match on that show was that awful Rumble-style gauntlet match that just descended into bad comedy, and really a lot of the women in that match deserved a lot more. So that's why I'm excited to see who Perez's next opponent could be. It could be Susie, aka Su Yung, who's really scary and terrifying. It could be Taya Valkyrie as well. It could be a rematch for Jordynne Grace. It could be one of any number. Kiera Hogan's another good example. It could be one of any number of really exciting knockouts in that division. But now it's time for number 1 and my wrestler of the week, picking up 10 big points in his first appearance as well. Oh man, it's the King, Eddie Kingston. So when I was talking about Cody's match earlier, I deliberately didn't mention who his opponent was, and that's because it was Eddie Kingston, and I was so excited. I was potentially more excited even than I was when the Machine Guns returned to Impact. For those who don't know, well, they probably know now if they watch Dynamite this week, but Eddie Kingston, for my money, is one of the best promos in all of wrestling. He's so convincing, so good, and he opened the show by cutting off Cody and just talking at him, and it was so good. And then the match came, and then the match was fantastic as well. Not a blowaway, outrageous, amazing match that'll go down in the history of Dynamite matches, but in terms of moments, Eddie Kingston's debut could well be a moment. I mean, if they don't invite him back, then what are they doing? Because Eddie Kingston is so usable. They can utilize him in so many ways, even though he's not the youngest guy around. And despite not being the youngest guy around, he can still wrestle as well. The match was good. It had that no DQ stipulation, which they made very good use of. Cody took that 6th thumbtacks bump. Eddie Kingston was just hitting him really hard. And that brought the best out of Cody, and they were just lamping each other pretty intensely until eventually Cody did get the win with the figure 4 leg lock. If there was just one thing I could have changed, that would have been Eddie Kingston not tapping out to the figure four, maybe getting pinned or something like that, but don't tap out on your first appearance. He's Eddie Kingston, he never dies. Apart from that though, can't complain at all. And if you haven't seen it already, do check out that promo he did after the show. It's on AEW's YouTube channel. It's phenomenal. He's holding back tears. He's saying, I don't know if I'm going to be able to return, but I hope I can one day. I'll be back. And he walks off because he's about to burst into tears, and it's so convincing and he's so good, and he has to come back. He must come back, AEW. Please bring him back. So congratulations, Eddie Kingston. You are one of my favorite wrestlers around, and also my wrestler of the week. Now, without any further ado, let's take a look at that lovely league table. So Cody has extended his lead slightly at the top of the table over Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley, the AEW trio, who are ruling the roost in 2020 in terms of wrestlers of the week points, but there's a big chasing pack as well: McIntyre, Tanaka, Lee and Takagi. As we move a little bit further down, we see the likes of Daniel Bryan, who we haven't seen any of recently due to the current circumstances, but that means he picked up a lot of points early on in the year, which is a big shame to see him slip down a little bit. A little bit further down as well, we get the likes of Tomohiro Ishii from New Japan, of course, Aleister Black, Pac, who we haven't seen as well, and there's little Otis Dozovic at the bottom. Go on, Otis, you can do it, mate. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack, and this has been Wrestlers of the Week. Leave your thoughts and opinions in that comment section down below. Stay safe, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.